The cameras lit up, the microphones were live, and the tension was already unbearable. Then it happened. Donald Trump, sitting across from Jasmine Crockett on national television, erupted in anger as her words cut straight into the core of his legacy. She didn't hesitate. She didn't soften the blow. Looking him directly in the eye, she declared, "Your empire was built on lies, and tonight those lies are crumbling in front of millions." The studio went silent for a moment, the audience holding its breath, before Trump slammed the desk, his voice rising, demanding she retract her words. But it was too late. The hook had been set, and the show was no longer a debate. It was a battle for the truth, live on air, with every viewer glued to the screen. The setting was a primetime political special, one of those rare live broadcasts where the stakes felt bigger than the stage itself. Donald Trump came into the studio with his usual swagger, ready to dominate the conversation and brush aside any criticism with sharp retorts and dismissive gestures. But across from him sat Representative Jasmine Crockett, known for her fearless rhetoric and razor-sharp precision. The host barely managed to set the scene before sparks began to fly. Crockett wasted no time framing the debate. This isn't about ratings, this isn't about gossip. This is about the truth that Americans deserve to hear. Her words struck a tone of seriousness while Trump leaned back with a smirk, muttering under his breath, already preparing to unleash his signature barrage of counterattacks. The audience, both in the studio and across the nation, knew they were about to witness a clash unlike any other. On one side, a former president desperate to shield his name and rewrite history in real time. On the other, a congresswoman determined to torch every layer of his carefully built legacy, no matter the cost. The lines were drawn, the participants locked in, and every camera lens focused on their looming confrontation. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her tone sharpened like a blade. "Mr. Trump, the country remembers the scandals you want buried. From secret deals that benefited your empire to the recent DNA revelations, tearing apart the image of your family, your so-called legacy is nothing more than smoke and mirrors." The words echoed across the studio, leaving the host stunned, the audience buzzing, and Trump visibly rattled. He shot back immediately, his voice booming. "That is a disgusting lie, a total fabrication. You're exploiting my family for your cheap political theater." His fists clenched as he tried to drown her out, but Crockett refused to yield. "Cheap theater?" she snapped, cutting through his rant. "Theater is when you pretend corruption is success. Theater is when you sell out the American people while lining your own pockets. And theater is when you scream instead of answering the question, what truth are you so afraid of?" The clash grew hotter with each exchange. Trump shouted about witch hunts and fake news, insisting the revelations were planted by enemies determined to destroy him. Crockett, unfazed, listed scandal after scandal, hush money payments, broken promises, and manipulation of the media. Every attempt by Trump to interrupt her only backfired, making him look more desperate. The host tried to mediate, but his voice was drowned out by the storm on stage. Crockett raised her voice once more. "You can yell all you want, but America is tired of excuses. Tonight, you will answer to the truth." The studio audience erupted in applause, and social media lit up instantly, clips spreading in real time. It wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a demolition of the myth Trump had fought so hard to preserve. The shouting match reached its breaking point. Trump, red-faced and furious, leaned over the desk, his voice cracking as he barked, "You don't get to rewrite history. I built this country back from disaster, and you're nothing but a loudmouth chasing headlines." Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She stood her ground, calm but fierce, letting his words hang in the air for only a moment before striking with the blow that silenced the room. "You didn't build a legacy, Mr. Trump. You built an empire on sand, and tonight the tide has finally come in." The audience gasped, some clapping, others shouting, but no one unmoved. Trump slammed his hand against the table, shouting over her, "Lies! Absolute lies!" But the more he screamed, the weaker he looked. The contrast was devastating, his fury against her icy precision. The host tried to steer the program back under control, but it was too late. Crockett's words reverberated across the stage like a gavel, A final judgment passed in front of millions. Clips of her line exploded online within minutes, repeated endlessly as the defining moment of the night. For Trump, the eruption was meant to project strength, but instead it revealed vulnerability. For Crockett, the confrontation was more than a debate. It was the torch that burned through the myth of his invincibility. And as she delivered that final strike, the balance of power on stage shifted irreversibly. The broadcast wound down, but the echoes of the clash refused to fade. Donald Trump sat seething, his face frozen in anger, still muttering about conspiracies and betrayals. But Jasmine Crockett had already seized the narrative. She leaned into the camera, her closing words cutting through the noise. The truth doesn't fear the light, and tonight America saw exactly what you've been trying to hide. The studio erupted in cheers and gasps, the host barely able to close the segment. Within minutes, the clip dominated headlines across every network. Social media feeds exploded, hashtags surged, and memes of Trump's furious outbursts spread like wildfire. Late-night shows replayed Crockett's final line, comedians turned it into punchlines, and political commentators called it a turning point. Supporters of Trump tried to defend him, insisting it was an ambush, but even some of his allies admitted his eruption only made him look weaker. Meanwhile, Crockett's defiance became a rallying cry. Across the country, her words were repeated in living rooms, on radio shows, and in crowded bars. She had turned a live broadcast into a political earthquake. By the end of the night, one thing was undeniable. Trump's legacy had been torched on live television, not by a scandal whispered in backrooms or leaked documents, but by a fearless voice that refused to be silenced. His eruption, meant to drown out the criticism, had instead amplified it, leaving the world to wonder if this was the moment history would mark as the beginning of his downfall. Even after the cameras stopped rolling, the shockwaves kept spreading. Newsrooms scrambled to analyze every second of the broadcast, dissecting Crockett's words and Trump's explosive reaction. Political analysts described the exchange as a public unmasking, the moment when bravado collided head-on with accountability. Outside the studio, protesters and supporters clashed, holding up signs and chanting slogans as though history had shifted in real time. For Trump loyalists, the night was framed as a setup, a hostile environment engineered to humiliate him. But for millions of viewers, it was undeniable proof that his legacy could not withstand scrutiny under the harsh light of truth. Crockett, meanwhile, doubled down in follow-up interviews, refusing to let the fire die. "This wasn't personal," she said, her voice calm but firm. "This was about showing the American people that no one is above the truth, not even a former president." Her composure in the aftermath stood in stark contrast to Trump's frantic statements, which grew more erratic with each appearance. Social media amplified the divide. Clips of Trump's eruption became instant viral sensations, remixed into satirical videos, dissected in political podcasts, and even transformed into protest chants. Crockett's final line, "An empire on sand," became a trending phrase, painted on posters and splashed across digital billboards. By the next morning, headlines around the world captured the fallout. "Crockett torches Trump on live TV," blared one. "Legacy in flames," read another. And in political circles, the question shifted from whether Trump could recover to how much damage had already been done. For many, the debate had not just been a televised argument. It had been a symbolic reckoning, a raw moment where power, pride, and truth collided. And as the dust settled, one fact was impossible to ignore. Donald Trump had lost control of the stage, and Jasmine Crockett had written herself into history as the one who dared to strike the match.